Good morning, you're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani, taking you through the top stories for the morning. And first we head to the headlines. Let's take a look. Tensions in the Middle East are escalating as the United States and Israel launch their most intense strikes on Iran yet. Ukraine is sharing its air defense expertise to help counter Iranian drones. And at least 6 people have died after a bus caught fire in Switzerland. First this morning, it's now the 12th day since the US and Israel launched its attack on Iran, and intense airstrikes on Tehran increased on Tuesday night. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps said that it was beginning the 35th wave of its operation, attacking American military bases in the Middle East and locations in central Israel, while the US military said it destroyed Iranian naval ships, including 16 mine layers near the Strait of Hormuz. Here's more.
The United States and Israel carried out the most intense airstrikes of the war on Tuesday, as the US destroyed several Iranian mine-laying vessels near the Strait of Hormuz, further raising tensions in the region. US President Donald Trump said on social media that American forces had destroyed 10 inactive boats suspected of laying naval mines, warning that any vessel attempting to mine the waterway would be dealt with quickly and violently. US Central Command later confirmed that a total of 16 Iranian mine-laying ships had been destroyed near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important energy choke points, where roughly a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments pass through. Meanwhile, a suspected Iranian drone struck a US diplomatic support facility in Baghdad on Tuesday, hitting near a guard tower at the Baghdad Diplomatic Support Center close to the airport. Officials have not confirmed casualties, but the incident highlights growing threats to US personnel in the region. The developments come as Iran launched what it described as its most intense wave of strikes since the conflict began. Iranian state media said missiles targeted Israeli territory and US assets across the Middle East. Sirens sounded in parts of Israel, while Saudi Arabia said it intercepted several ballistic missiles and drones heading toward military and energy sites. Washington says the objectives of the operation are to destroy Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, weaken its regional proxy forces, and ensure Tehran never obtains a nuclear weapon.
Now let's take a look at the stories shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to The Guardian, which has been watching what's been going on in the Middle East in relation to Iran war. The updates: the regime issues threat against protesters, drone reportedly hits major US diplomatic facilities in Iraq. Well, we know that Iran has launched missiles towards Israel. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said they targeted a satellite communications center in Haifa along with military bases in Israel, and US targets elsewhere in the region, including the Iraqi Kurdistan and the US 5th Fleet naval base in Bahrain. So we know that the constant attacks are going back and forth. Now, a drone struck a major US diplomatic facility in Iraq on Tuesday, and Iran's police chief have also said that, and he's warned basically any Iranians who decide to take to the streets at the enemy's request will be confronted as an enemy, not a protester. So this particular threat, it follows the calls made by both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, who have called on Iranians to take to the streets to overthrow their regime in recent weeks. But now the actual police officials have said that you will be treated as an enemy and not as someone that is a citizen of Iran. Now, also to add that there's a number of, as you can see on this particular site, which is actually Reuters, what this now looks like in relation to a lot of explosions, a lot of drone strikes are just filling up the air. And as you can see, the plumes of smoke, the plumes of everything that's been going on of recent, and the actual toxicity and pollution that is spreading in a number of places across Iran and across the Middle East. Now, the US has also destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels near the Strait of Hormuz, and Donald Trump said that the US had hit and completely destroyed 10 inactive mine-laying vessels, warning that more would follow. Now, we know that the Trump administration is reportedly considering the deployment of special forces to enter into Iran to secure its stockpile of nuclear weapons. And yesterday, Pete Hegseth gave a news conference and warned of most intense day of US strikes on Iran was coming, and it definitely did, especially towards the end of Tuesday night into the morning as well. Here on this particular map, you can see all the places that have actually been hit, especially in regards to the main city, Tehran, as well as further afield. So we do know that this is increasing as Donald Trump says that he thinks that the war will be over very soon. But we'll keep you up to date with everything in regards to that. We now go to the next story, and that's on the BBC website, and that's in regards to Switzerland, and at least 6 dead in Switzerland due to a bus fire. Now, 6 people have been killed and a few others have been injured after a bus caught on fire in a western town in Switzerland, in a town in western Switzerland, and that's according to police. Now, the incident took place around the evening time yesterday on Tuesday in the center of the Curzes, known as the French Terres. At least 3 people we now know have been taken to hospital, and no one knows exactly what the cause of the fire was. Police are actually investigating it to find out if it was deliberately started, but videos posted on social media shows that the bus in flames and local residents describing a thick column of smoke. But we'll keep you informed. As you can see, that bus there looks extremely bad and heavily burnt in relation to the smoke. We will definitely provide you with an update once Switzerland police have figured out what has caused this particular blaze. Okay, we now go to the next story and headlining on the Deutsche Welle website, and that's Madagascar strongman sacks government after just 5 months. So Madagascar's military leader and interim president Michael Arandjirina has sacked his prime minister and dissolved the cabinet 5 months after seizing power on the back of youth-led protests against the former government in Antananarivo. So in a statement they put out from the presidential office, they said that the prime minister would appoint shortly someone new. Now the dismissed cabinet had been made up of a mixture of civilian ministers and some military officials as well, and some critics of Rajoelina. Now, just a quick fact in regards to this story. This government came into power after protests last September due to water and power shortages that had got a lot of people upset and angry. Now, that's actually snowballed into anti-government protests that the Rajoelina government tried to suppress. But they were later overturned, and a new interim government is currently in place right now. And with that news telling us that that cabinet minister has now been let go. Okay, we now head over to the next headline, and that's on the New York Times, and that's in regards to what Australia have done. And they've given asylum to 5 members of Iranian women's soccer team. Now, not only have they done that, which we covered on yesterday, they've actually increased it to 2 extra members of the Iranian football women's team have also been given visas. They accepted the offer to stay in the country and will be granted with humanitarian visas. Now, the pair, one a player and one a member of the support staff, have now been reunited with the other 5 players who were granted visas on the Tuesday. They were granted asylum because of concerns about the team's safety when they decided not to sing the national anthem ahead of their match against South Korea last week. Now, we understand that the remaining Iranian players left Australia on Tuesday night, 2 days after they were knocked out of the Asian Cup. Australia's humanitarian visa program actually grants permanent protection to refugees and people in humanitarian need, and the visa holders, they can actually live, work and study in the country, and that's what they have been provided with following their request to want to stay in the country. Okay, well, that's the press roundup for now. I'm now going to go to a short break, but when I return, I'll discuss the rest of the global stories. Make sure you don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories. We turn first to what was reported by the Financial Times that suggested that Israel could be extending its offensive in Lebanon. This comes as the US-Israel war with Iran pushes well into its second week.
As the world focuses on the US-Israel war with Iran, which has brought instability to the Middle East, another conflict in the region is unfolding simultaneously and could outlast the fighting with Tehran. A report by the Financial Times says Israel is preparing to expand its ongoing campaign in Lebanon against the militant group Hezbollah, citing sources familiar with the discussions. Israel's latest offensive against the Iran-backed group began after Hezbollah fired rockets into northern Israel in retaliation for the assassination of Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei. Israel had previously launched a full-scale offensive in Lebanon in October 2024, leading to a year of cross-border fighting between the two sides. The clashes began when Hezbollah fired rockets into Israel following Hamas's October 2023 attack from Gaza. A US brokered ceasefire formally ended the fighting, but Israel continued near-daily strikes. According to a source cited by the Financial Times, the goal of Israel's current campaign in Lebanon is to inflict enough damage on Hezbollah to deter future confrontations. Since the latest escalation, Israeli forces have struck more than 600 sites across Lebanon, with most attacks targeting the country's south and Beirut's densely populated southern suburbs, where Hezbollah has a strong presence. The Israeli military has also deployed forces inside Lebanese territory at least 12 outposts along the narrow frontier. Officials say the move is defensive and intended to preempt potential Hezbollah attacks. Sources also suggest Israeli troops could be sent to the Bekaa Valley, parts of which are considered a Hezbollah stronghold. Although the Lebanese government condemned Hezbollah's initial actions and banned its military activity following the escalation, Israeli officials have signalled they remain committed to their objectives.
Australia has granted 2 more Iranian female football players humanitarian visas after they expressed they wanted to stay in the country. The players, plus a previous 5, were granted asylum after concerns about the team's safety when they did not sing the national anthem ahead of their match against South Korea last week. Australia's Immigration Minister Tony Burke happily welcomed their decision to stay.
2 members of the group that was part of the Iranian women's soccer delegation had indicated that they wanted to take up an offer from Australia. One was a player, one was a support person. With the assistance of the Australian Federal Police, they were separated from the rest of the group and taken to a safe location. When I met with them, I made them the same offer that I had made the 5 players the night before. And that was that if they wanted to receive a humanitarian visa for Australia, which would have a pathway to a permanent visa, I had the paperwork ready to execute that immediately. They both said that they did. We as a nation are lucky that you chose us, and I think they are only just beginning to realise just how welcome they are here in Australia.
Ukraine has sent air defense specialists to several Middle Eastern countries to share their expertise. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky said he had responded to a US request for help in their fight against Iran's aerial attacks.
3 professional teams have been deployed to Qatar, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. The teams will assist these countries in countering Iranian aerial and drone threats. Zelensky emphasized that the experience of Ukrainian pilots and operators is key to the effective operation of these systems of drones interceptors. He noted that some countries had purchased such systems, but without Ukraine's military operators and software, they cannot function effectively. Ukrainian officials also said some specialists have already been deployed to a US military base in Jordan. However, no further details were provided. Kyiv has gained significant experience in countering Iranian-designed Shahed attack drones used by Russia. According to Ukrainian officials, Russia has launched more than 57,000 such drones against Ukraine so far. Reports suggest that the United States and Qatar are also interested in purchasing Ukraine's interceptor drones as a cheaper alternative to missiles for shooting down Shahed drones. Zelensky said Ukraine expects to receive air defense missiles in return for this cooperation. In particular, there is an ongoing shortage of missiles for the US-made Patriot missile system. The president also noted that rising tensions involving Iran have delayed the next round of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. The meeting, expected to take place next week, may also discuss further prisoner exchanges and a possible meeting between Zelensky, US President Donald Trump, and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Turkey says it is strengthening its air defense capabilities and coordinating closely with NATO allies after ballistic missiles entered Turkish airspace in recent days. The developments come as Ankara continues diplomatic contacts with regional leaders in an effort to contain the expanding regional conflict. Here are the details.
In a statement released Tuesday, the Turkish Defense Ministry announced that Turkey was in close consultation with its NATO allies to enhance the country's air defense capabilities. According to the ministry, these measures include the deployment of a Patriot air defense system that is currently being prepared for operational readiness in Turkey's east-central Malatya region. The announcement came amid heightened tensions after a second ballistic missile linked to the ongoing regional conflict entered Turkish airspace on Monday. Turkish officials say NATO air defense units intercepted 2 such missiles within the past week. The incidents prompted Turkey's foreign ministry to summon Iran's ambassador in Ankara to formally protest the alleged missile launches. Iranian authorities, however, have denied that their forces targeted Turkish territory. In a phone call Monday, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan told Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian that violations of Turkish airspace could not be justified under any circumstances. Erdogan warned that missile strikes affecting neighboring countries would benefit no one and only risked widening the conflict. He also stressed that Ankara opposed what he described as unlawful interventions against Iran and continued to pursue diplomatic efforts aimed at ending the crisis. Pezeshkian, for his part, told his Turkish counterpart that Tehran would launch an investigation into allegations that Iranian missiles had entered Turkish airspace. According to Iranian officials, Pezeshkian also accused Israel and the United States of attempting to create tensions between Iran and its neighbors, including Turkey. On the same day, Erdogan also spoke by phone with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. Aliyev condemned Monday's reported missile attack targeting Turkey and expressed solidarity with what he described as the brotherly Turkish people. Erdogan thanked the Azerbaijani leader for the call and for Baku's continued support. Officials say Ankara will continue coordinating closely with its NATO allies while monitoring developments in the region. This is Adam Morrow for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
A bus fire in western Switzerland has killed 6 people and others injured on Wednesday. At least 3 people were taken to hospital and the police have opened a criminal investigation. Here's more on the story.
On Wednesday, a coach fire in a small town in western Switzerland claimed at least 6 lives, prompting the police to open a criminal investigation. Fribourg police reported that the coach was engulfed in flames on a road in the town of Curzes.
Regarding the incident, it occurred around 6:25 p.m, a little before 6:30 p.m, when calls alerted us to a bus on fire on Anukrittenstrasse. At that location, emergency services, police, paramedics and firefighters found a bus engulfed in flames. Injured individuals had exited the bus. The firefighters extinguished the blaze in several stages, and we have now determined that there are deceased individuals inside the bus. We will have to wait for my colleagues in the investigation to determine the number and identity of the deceased.
Frederic Papot said, "At this stage, a deliberate act could be the cause of this tragedy. We really want to find out what happened."
Well, at this point, a deliberate act could be the cause of this tragedy. We really want to know what happened, and for that reason, we are appealing to the press and, through you, to the public and witnesses of this event.
The police also added that 3 injured people were taken to hospital.
The UK government is preparing to release documents on the appointment of former ambassador to the US, Peter Mandelson. Parliamentarians forced the release of the documents using a parliamentary procedure known as a humble address, with the material expected to be published at lunchtime today. Mandelson, a senior Labour figure and former cabinet minister, was appointed to the Washington Post in December 2024, but was later dismissed following scrutiny over his past association with Jeffrey Epstein. He resigned from the Labour Party in February and was arrested weeks later on suspicion of misconduct in public office.
If we could have brought about a rationalisation.
Chile's President-elect José Antonio Cast held a series of bilateral meetings with international leaders in Santiago ahead of the presidential handover scheduled for today. Spain's King Felipe V arrived at Palacio Cocino for a protocol greeting and a meeting with Cast. The president-elect also met with the OAS Secretary-General Albert Ramdin and the Costa Rican President Rodrigo Chavez. The meetings formed part of his diplomatic agenda before formally taking office at the National Congress in Valparaiso. The United States says international aid to Afghanistan should be reassessed even as the country faces a worsening humanitarian crisis. Speaking at the UN Security Council, Washington pointed to Taliban restrictions, especially on women, as a key concern. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has more.
The United States says international assistance to Afghanistan needs closer evaluation, citing the Taliban's continued restriction on women and limited cooperation with the international community. Addressing the UN Security Council, US Ambassador Mike Waltz said the world must consider how effective its engagement is, particularly when female Afghan staff working for the United Nations are not even allowed to go into the office. Waltz also highlighted the scale of the UN assistance mission in Afghanistan, which has the largest budget of any special UN mission, with its mandate up for renewal next week. At the same time, the humanitarian situation in Afghanistan remains severe. The UN World Food Programme says more than 17 million people, around one-third of the population, are facing acute food shortages, including nearly 5 million experiencing emergency levels of hunger. UN officials warn the crisis is worsening as funding falls short. Humanitarian agencies hope to assist 17.5 million Afghans next year through a $1.7 billion appeal. But so far, only about 10% of that funding has been secured. They also caution that ongoing regional tensions and rising prices are adding pressure. And without progress on rights and humanitarian issues, Afghanistan could again become a source of broader instability. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
A powerful volcanic eruption is lighting up the sky in Hawaii again, sending towering lava fountains into the air. Kilauea is one of the most active volcanoes on Earth and regularly produces dramatic eruptions. Lava shot up to around 400 meters with thick ash and smoke rising high above the crater. The plume reached roughly 7.6 kilometers above sea level. That's according to the National Weather Service. Japan is marking the 15th anniversary since a devastating earthquake and tsunami struck the country's northeastern areas, triggering the world's worst nuclear disaster since the Chernobyl crisis in 1986. Here's more.
In 2011, at 2:46 p.m. on March 11th, massive earthquake and tsunami struck Japan, leaving more than 20,000 people dead or missing and triggering a triple meltdown at a nuclear plant. The catastrophe caused the worst nuclear accident since Chernobyl at Tokyo Electric Power Company's Fukushima Daiichi plant, 220 kilometers northeast of Tokyo. Hundreds of thousands of residents were forced to flee their homes after the disaster, which was classified a Level 7 event on the International Nuclear and Radiological Event Scale. Japan is now marking the 15th anniversary of the disaster. In August 2023, Japan began discharging more than 1 million tons of treated radioactive water from the plant into the ocean, a process expected to take decades to complete. Regulators say it is safe to release the water, which is filtered to remove most isotopes, although it still contains traces of tritium, an isotope of hydrogen that is difficult to separate from water. Japanese utilities have struggled to restart nuclear reactors since the 2011 Fukushima disaster, limiting nuclear power to just 8.5% of Japan's electricity supply in 2023. Before the accident, the country operated 54 reactors that provided around 30% of its energy needs. As decommissioning work at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant continues, its operator TEPCO plans to restart commercial operation of the number 6 reactor at the Kashiwazaki Kariwa nuclear power plant in Niigata Prefecture on March 18th, which would make it the first reactor owned by TEPCO to restart since 2011.
Over to a quick break now. When I return, I'll be joined by a studio guest to discuss some of the regional headlines taking place throughout the day. Stay with me. Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now we turn to other news in regards to what is happening across the Middle East and in Iran at a time when conflict surrounding Iran has become the main focus of the world's attention. Concerns over the growing strategic relevance of the Middle Corridor, whose importance has only increased in recent weeks, a reality increasingly acknowledged by both European and American leaders. Against this backdrop, Japan has in recent years been steadily expanding its engagement with the countries of Central Asia, which sit along the Middle Corridor route. Now, here to discuss this is Chijiro Takeshita, professor at the University of Shioko in Japan. Welcome this morning.
Thank you for having me.
My first question really to this is, to what extent has the Middle Corridor become an even more strategically important in light of the current crisis surrounding Iran?
Especially so, considering the fact that Japan has a very high reliant ratio on oil, especially after the disaster of the East Japan earthquake back in 2011, where we had our nuclear dependency to 30%. That's dropped to 0. Now it's back to 8.5, but we are still very much reliant on oil supply. And in fact, it's well over 90% reliant ratio of oil to the Middle East. For Japan to basically have a good relationship with other nations to basically diversify this risk is very, very important, especially in logistics terms, especially with these 5 Central Asian nations, to make sure that we have other means of logistics, other means of geographical, I would say, assurance to basically supply various needs for our materials.
So what is Japan's interest then in gaining access to Central Asia's rare earth minerals and other strategic raw materials? And to what extent do you think Japan is realistically able to compete with other actors like the US and China in relation to that?
Well, I think there are various issues involved. I think I would say the 5 Central nations have been almost overlooked by its potential, particularly considering the fact that exploration, processing, and long-term supply of issues like uranium, rare metals, and gallium, which Japan needs very much. And at the same time, Japan provide various types of technology as well as financing. There is a lot of win-win situation that were there, which hadn't been exploited enough. And certainly, I think, especially at times when you have China showing signs of excessive aggression, and many of the Japanese corporations and entities trying to basically walk away from this excessive reliance to China. And at the same time, we're getting this trouble from these Trump taxation issues. We can clearly see that we need to make a mutual one-on-one relationship rather than relying excessively on the 2 big powers. So I think it almost makes total sense that we're now starting to really look on each other's potential. Now, we're not going to replace China or Russia or US. I think Japan's intention is to make sure that we exploit, or I shouldn't, exploit isn't the right word, but make use of the full potential that we both have.
And can you just expand on that a little bit more in relation to the role played by Central Asia's resources? You mentioned uranium imports as well. So uranium imports from Kazakhstan, as well as copper, zinc and other critical minerals in supporting Japan's green technology industries. How important are these resources for Japan's broader economic strategy?
Vital. We all know that China is going to use the game card of utilizing their economic power, and one of them is rare metals. And this is one of the issues that Japan is very much concerned about. So we need to diversify our provision from that point of view. So we need to rely heavily on other sources, which are basically what I call the transactional 25, meaning that they're not excessively reliant to unitarian nations, but not excessively reliant to the free world nations, which is basically the definition, I would say, of many of the Central Asian nations. I know that historically Central Asian nations have been extremely dependent on Russia and China recently, but I would say that, it's also a very much of an opening opportunity for these countries to start a very new good alliance and relationship with the new world, such as Japan.
Well, that's just that. I was going to say, why is this opportunity quite critical then for the Central Asian countries to open up its arms to other investors in that locality, and how might that also boost the economy in its countries?
To make the long story short, you will not be enslaved by the economic conditions or glutters or clitters that you can see in many of, for example, African nations, by the Chinese. You can have a fair one-on-one mutual relationship that could be built on free world trade. And of course, you do have some gluts like the Trump administration, giving those kind of unreasonable, requests on taxation. But overall, in longitude analysis and long term, you will have a good long-term relationship which would benefit us all. Again, not only in terms of these materials we talked about, but from geopolitical and geographical sense as well, where we can basically utilize the Eurasian kind of connection to basically, I would say, improve the cycle of the economy for both our regions.
And what do you think are the main challenges to this economic goal between Japan and Central Asian countries? What do you have to actually combat and overcome if there are any obstacles ahead?
Firstly, awareness. Again, about the fact that we both have wonderful potential, that we can mutual benefit. I think we should realize on that a lot more. Secondly, I would say that there could be some barge away from external sources. It could be from some of the jealousy or, barge away from domination by the Chinese authorities or Russians, or, maybe you would have these kind of Trumpinist kind of, I would say, of global expansion kind of schemes that would take place. These external noise would be definitely one of the biggest problems that we have to face. But again, this is the time when we have to focus on our mutual benefit, mutual beneficiary that would take place in this occasion.
Right. And how might Japanese trade with Azerbaijan be elevated, and to what extent could deeper cooperation along the Middle Corridor actually expand economic ties between the two countries?
One of the important things that, Japan, or say Japanese corporations, started to realize is country risk. They've expanded their business, which was very fine, but at the same time, they're starting to understand the country risk behind an issue that's governed by unitarian states. So I would say that, these 5 Central Asian nations should continue to increase their opportunity through providing, the safety of, free world ideology trade in order to sustain further growth in this area. I think this is one of the most important things, to basically soothe the mind of people who are trying to invest, basically giving them security that it is okay to invest in these nations.
And just on that then, what is the kind of focal goal or economic goal in relation to the South Caucasus? Do you see Japan extending itself from Central Asia over to the South Caucasus, such as, Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia, in regards to the Middle Corridor?
Definitely. Japan was part of the international alliance that's led by the United States, but as you can see, the United States is parting away from its, I would say, position as the leader of the free world trade. Trump administration, at least, is definitely putting the clock backwards. In order to basically protect ourselves from these kind of situation, you can see Canadians and Europeans basically starting a lot more of a bilateral relationship, or I would say relationship that would basically enact to provide protection from these negative issues. So, from here onwards, I think it would benefit Japan and also many of these 5 Central Asian nations who should also part away from this excessive inclination toward the unitarian state to benefit from a lot of juices that comes from the free world trade.
And just on Iran and the conflict happening over in the Middle East, how is that impacting Japan and its economy, especially now that we know that the Strait of Hormuz has been closed due to the conflict there and oil prices have surged? Are we seeing this also being impacted at home in Japan?
Oh yes, devastating, because Japan relies 99% of oil overseas and over 90% to Middle East. So obviously this is a very negative logistic factor. We do have, I would say, internal inventory of over 250 days, which is twice as much as UK and other European nations. But that said, the vulnerability of this energy situation is very, very obvious. And if it is, as we say, it is being accommodated, it would cause a lot of inflationary fears in Japan, which would basically tip off the very good, I would say, sentiment that we're feeling right now with the Takaichi regime to go forward. So this could be a very negative, issues that could trip the trend of Japan that is to take place.
Definitely. I'm sure you're not the only country that's watching this very closely. As much as you have reserves, it's still very concerning as the uncertainty grows in relation to what's going on there. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Mr. Takashita, and for your insights. It's been very helpful this morning. Thank you. Now, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan are strengthening cooperation on the management of transboundary water resources as Central Asia faces growing pressure on its limited water supply. Our correspondent in Tashkent brings us more.
Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan are expanding cooperation on managing shared rivers and reservoirs, according to Uzbekistan's ambassador to Kyrgyzstan, Said Akram Niyaz Hojayev. Coordination between the two countries takes place through intergovernmental mechanisms, including regular meetings of a joint commission on water management. The sides work together on distributing water resources from transboundary rivers, preparing for the agricultural irrigation season, and improving the efficiency of water use. Water resources in Central Asia are mainly formed upstream. Along 43% of the region's river flow originates in Tajikistan and about 25% in Kyrgyzstan, while downstream countries, including Uzbekistan, depend heavily on these flows for agriculture and energy. The region's two main rivers, the Amu Darya and Sri Darya, together provide roughly 116 billion cubic meters of water annually. Uzbekistan uses about 51 billion cubic meters of water per year, and nearly 80% of this comes from transboundary sources, making regional cooperation essential. Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan also coordinate reservoir operations and major hydropower initiatives, including the Kambora Tau 1 hydropower plant. The ambassador noted that Uzbekistan is also investing heavily in water efficiency. Between 2020 and 2024, the country allocated more than $4.8 billion in state funds, along with $622 million in foreign investment, to introduce water-saving technologies. These systems now cover about 2.6 million hectares, roughly 60% of irrigated land, saving around 2.5 billion cubic meters of water annually. Niyaz Hojayev added that Uzbekistan is also modernizing its water management systems, expanding digital monitoring of irrigation infrastructure, and planning further reforms under a national program for water resource management, running until 2028. It is Sivid Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, and News.
The European Union announced that Georgia's Kulevi oil terminal will be excluded from its 20th sanctions package against Russia. EU reassessed its initial position after receiving commitments from Georgian authorities and the terminal's operator that they would strictly comply with EU sanctions. Our correspondent has more from Tbilisi.
The European Union has decided not to include Georgia's Kulevi oil terminal in its upcoming 20th sanctions package against Russia, a move that changes the picture around an issue that had drawn growing attention across the region. According to a letter sent by EU Special Representative for Sanctions, David O'Sullivan, to Georgia's Foreign Minister Maka Bochorishvili, the port had initially been considered for sanctions because of concerns related to the transport of Russian oil and the possible presence of vessels linked to Russia's so-called shadow fleet. These ships are often used to move oil while avoiding Western restrictions. However, the EU says the situation was reassessed after commitments from the Georgian government and the port operator. Tbilisi assured Brussels that vessels already sanctioned by the EU would not be allowed to enter Georgian ports or receive services there. At the same time, the operator of the Kulevi terminal, Azerbaijan state energy company SOCAR, also reinforced its commitment to follow all relevant EU sanctions, including the price cap on Russian crude oil and restrictions on petroleum products derived from Russian oil. EU officials say these assurances were a key factor behind the decision to exclude the port from the sanctions package. The case has drawn attention partly because of Kulevi's strategic role in regional logistics. Located on Georgia's Black Sea coast, the terminal is part of the broader transport network connecting the Caspian region with European markets. This route, often referred to as the Middle Corridor, links Central Asia and the South Caucasus with Europe through a combination of rail, road, and maritime connections. The EU says that it is continuing its broader effort to limit Russian oil exports and prevent sanctions evasion. More than 600 vessels are already under EU restrictions for involvement in high-risk shipping practices, and around 40 additional ships are expected to be added in the next sanctions package. In Tbilisi, representatives of the ruling Georgian Dream Party said that the EU decision confirms Georgia has been complying with sanctions and cooperating with international partners. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Reports circulating on social media about so-called acid clouds allegedly moving from Iran towards Central Asia have raised concerns among online users. The claims suggest harmful substances released after strikes on Iran's oil infrastructure could spread across the region. Our correspondent has more detail.
Reports about so-called acid clouds allegedly moving from Iran toward Central Asia are not supported by scientific data. National hydrometeorological services in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan say there is no risk to the region. In recent days, claims about a possible environmental danger have spread widely on social media and messaging platforms, raising concern among users. Posts suggested that following strikes on Iran's oil infrastructure, large amounts of harmful substances had been released into the atmosphere, potentially forming dangerous air masses capable of traveling long distances. However, specialists say these claims have no scientific basis. According to Kazakhstan's National Hydrometeorological Service, acid precipitation forms from sulfur and nitrogen oxides typically released by industrial activity, energy production, and transport, usually near the source of emissions. Experts explain that when air masses travel long distances, the concentration of these substances drops significantly due to natural atmospheric processes such as dilution and chemical reactions. Monitoring data show no signs of these pollutants moving toward Kazakhstan or other countries in Central Asia. Specialists are urging the public to rely on information from official meteorological and environmental services and to treat unverified claims circulating online with caution. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
The President of Finland, Alexander Stubb, and Transitional President of Syria, Ahmad al-Sharaa, both held a phone call with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. Stubb expressed Finland's support following Iran's attack on Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic yesterday, and the leaders discussed ways to strengthen bilateral ties. Al-Sharaa voiced concern over escalating tensions in the Middle East, emphasized the need to maintain regional security, and discussed expanding cooperation between Azerbaijan and Syria. Both leaders agreed to continue regular contact. Turkey's Vice President Cevdet Yilmaz met with Kuba Nochbek Omaraliyev, Secretary General of the Organization of the Turkic States in Ankara. Yilmaz said that regional and global developments make closer coordination between Turkic countries more important. Working together and improving cooperation is vital, he added. He also said he looks forward to the second OTS meeting of heads of government and vice presidents in Azerbaijan next month. Yilmaz concluded that Ankara will continue to work towards common goals to strengthen unity, solidarity and prosperity in the Turkic world. It's now time for a break. When I come back, I'll have a full update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the front pages this morning. Stay with me. Good morning, you're watching Daybreak live on A News, and if you're just joining me, I'm your host Nadia Jani, taking you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the headlines. Tensions in the Middle East are escalating as the United States and Israel launch their most intense strikes on Iran yet. Ukraine is sharing its air defense expertise to help counter Iranian drones. And at least 6 people have died after a bus caught on fire in Switzerland. Now let's take a look at the story shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to the BBC website and what's going to take place later today, because the first Mandelson files expected to be published on Wednesday. Now the UK government is expected to publish the first wave of internal documents relating to the appointment of Mandelson as British ambassador to the US on Wednesday lunchtime. Now the material will be accompanied by a statement in the Commons by the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones. We know that it's expected that the documents will detail elements about the process prior to his actual taking up the role in Washington. It is also expected that the documents will detail elements about the process prior to Mandelson taking up the role in Washington. We do know that early last month, the Conservatives, this is why it's been brought up, early last month, the Conservatives decided that wanted to use a parliamentary procedure known as a humble address to compel the government to release the papers, which is what has brought this into the light. And later on today, they'll find out exactly what some of that information details in relation to his appointment as US ambassador from the UK. Right, well, we will continue to keep you updated with that. We'll now go to the next outlet, and that's on the Guardian website. And it's just in regards to Switzerland bus fire that killed at least 6 could have been a deliberate act. Now, this is the video of some of that footage. So if we just play that, it will show some of what rescue services were able to see at the time of when they came to the actual area, and I can discuss in more detail. Now, we do know that at least 6 people and a few others have been injured after the bus caught on fire in a town in western Switzerland, and that's according to police. As you can see that graph there, it's in the Curzes area. Now, this happened towards yesterday evening that this took place, around 6:25 p.m. their local time on Tuesday. Now, the place is also known as, in French, as Chateres, and this is where the bus caught on fire. Now, we know that at least 3 people were taken to hospital, and the cause of the fire is still not known, but an investigation is underway as to whether it was deliberately started. We do know that the investigation might actually find that there are more people that unfortunately were killed by the fire, as well as it was transporting quite a few people. We don't have the full number, but we will definitely get that as the investigation continues as well. Now, the video posted by a local media show Bus in Flames. Now, this was on social media before this came out. Local residents described seeing a thick column of smoke coming out of that particular area at the time of the evening. Right, so we now go to our next headline in relation to what's going on in Iran, and it's day 11, it's actually day 12 of Middle East conflict. Hegseth press conference, White House details unconditional surrender demands. Well, as our first couple of headlines will show, that Iran has launched missiles towards Israel. Iran's Revolutionary Guard said that they targeted a satellite communication center in Haifa, along with military bases in Israel and US targets elsewhere in the region, including Iraqi Kurdistan and the US Fifth Fleet naval base in Bahrain. Now, a drone struck a US major diplomatic facility in Iraq on Tuesday. And Iran has also put out a statement. Its chief police, Ahmed Reza Radan, has warned Iranians on state TV that anyone who decides to take to the streets in protest will be seen as its enemy and will be confronted as such and not as a protester. Now, we need to remind you that this follows calls by both President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who've asked Iranians and called on them to take to the streets to overthrow the regime in recent weeks. But we do know that the regime has recently appointed a new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, in regards to that, and is continuing with their efforts in relation to the conflict there. But just also to bring you up to date that the US has actually destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels near the Strait of Hormuz as well. Well, we're going to go into our report that details more of what's happened and has taken place Tuesday night into Wednesday morning in relation to the conflict with Iran and the US and Israel.
The United States and Israel carried out the most intense airstrikes of the war on Tuesday as the US destroyed several Iranian mine-laying vessels near the Strait of Hormuz, further raising tensions in the region. US President Donald Trump said on social media that American forces had destroyed 10 inactive boats suspected of laying naval mines, warning that any vessel attempting to mine the waterway would be dealt with quickly and violently. US Central Command later confirmed that a total of 16 Iranian mine-laying ships had been destroyed near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important energy choke points, where roughly a fifth of global oil and liquefied natural gas shipments pass through. Meanwhile, a suspected Iranian drone struck a US diplomatic support facility in Baghdad on Tuesday, hitting near a guard tower at the Baghdad Diplomatic Support Center close to the airport. Officials have not confirmed casualties, but the incident highlights growing threats to US personnel in the region. The developments come as Iran launched what it described as its most intense wave of strikes since the conflict began. Iranian state media said missiles targeted Israeli territory and US assets across the Middle East. Sirens sounded in parts of Israel, while Saudi Arabia said it intercepted several ballistic missiles and drones heading toward military and energy sites. Washington says the objectives of the operation are to destroy Iran's ballistic missile arsenal, weaken its regional proxy forces, and ensure Tehran never obtains a nuclear weapon.
Ukraine has sent air defense specialists to several Middle Eastern countries to share their expertise. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky said he had responded to a US request for help in their fight against Iran's aerial attacks.
3 professional teams have been deployed to Qatar, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. The teams will assist these countries in countering Iranian aerial and drone threats. Zelensky emphasized that the experience of Ukrainian pilots and operators is key to the effective operation of these systems of drones interceptors. He noted that some countries had purchased such systems, but without Ukraine's military operators and software, they cannot function effectively. Ukrainian officials also said some specialists have already been deployed to a US military base in Jordan. However, no further details were provided. Kyiv has gained significant experience in countering Iranian-designed Shahed attack drones used by Russia. According to Ukrainian officials, Russia has launched more than 57,000 such drones against Ukraine so far. Reports suggest that the United States and Qatar are also interested in purchasing Ukraine's interceptor drones as a cheaper alternative to missiles for shooting down Shahed drones. Zelensky said Ukraine expects to receive air defense missiles in return for this cooperation. In particular, there is an ongoing shortage of missiles for the US-made Patriot missile system. The president also noted that rising tensions involving Iran have delayed the next round of peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. The meeting, expected to take place next week, may also discuss further prisoner exchanges and a possible meeting between Zelensky, US President Donald Trump, and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
In the second week of the war on Iran, Tehran continues to experience some of the most intense bombardments overnight. US President Donald Trump said on Monday the war could be over pretty quickly, adding he wasn't happy with its new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei. I am now joined by strategic affairs expert Dmitry Bridze and an expert in Russian International Affairs Council political analyst to discuss how countries are positioning themselves in this. Welcome to the program today.
Good morning. Thank you for.
Lovely. Okay, fine. So let's just get to the straight. My first question: how is the conflict reshaping global alliances? We are seeing a number of countries scramble together to figure out what it is that they want to do in relation to oil price surges, as well as responding to the conflict around.
Yeah, in my opinion, the current is another. It's rapidly becoming for the entire, of course, for Gulf countries that are attacked.
Oh, hello, hello, Dmitry. Can you hear me? Sorry, your connection seems to be quite jittery. Hello. Let's take that again. Sorry, I didn't catch any of that. Let's go from your top of your answer.
Yeah, so in my opinion, the current escalation around Iran is not just another regional it was before. We add how geopolitical stress test for the entire international system, and of course for the Gulf countries, because they have daily attacks by the Iranian side, and it's of course affecting their economy and affecting the situation in the entire Gulf countries because of the closure and because of the economical problems that they could face if the escalation will be for more months. And of course, what we are witnessing today is a conflict that has potential to markets and accelerate the transformation of the world order that has underway for more than a decade. And of course, the failed American operation, if the position of Iran was changed regarding the United States of America and Israel, it means also failed of the administration of Donald Trump to reshape the Middle East, or what they call the new Middle East. Of course, it means to more secure Israel from any potential risks in the future, make Iran weaker. Iran had its separations or in the region related to Hezbollah, Houthi, and other. But as we see after the 7th of October, a terrorist situation changed in the region, and Iran became weaker as it's not was being before. So now the United States of America, of course, destroyed the military potential of Iran and changed the political regime.
Okay, and just to focus on what's happening, especially in relation to recent regions kind of being involved in this, Turkey has called for an immediate ceasefire. China wants the conflict to end and a no change to the Iran's regime. And France has called both Iran and the US to come to a diplomatic conclusion in regards to this. Are we now beginning to see wider geopolitical alignment in regards to the conflict?
Of course, because as we know, the situation in Iran will affect Turkey as a neighbor country. And of course, any political change also will affect Turkey as of some is Turkey because of its position regarding the negotiations and the political regime in Iran. We know that in the beginning, was against the in the but after the Iranian how changed a little the of course the changed the Gulf countries' position regarding the neutrality that they had regarding the U.S. operation against Iran. So the Central Asian countries, the situation in affect them economically, politically, and also will affect the trading routes that are in the region if the escalation will become bigger, as we know. So the situation will.
And Dimitri, I just want to quickly cut in.
If they,
Sorry, just want to quickly cut in just because we're short for time. But can you just explain Russia and China's role in relation to this, as they are friends of Iran, you could say. So what is their positions in relation to this conflict?
Russia, of course, against the U.S. operation in Iran, but economic in world energy market benefit after the negotiations.
Oh, Dimitri, I'm not hearing you very well. I think there might be technical issues going on right now, but hopefully we can invite you back to hear fully what you had to say. I do apologise. It seems that we're not going to continue with the interview for now, but thank you so much for joining me so far.
Thank you.
Now, a bus fire in western Switzerland has killed 6 people and injured others on Tuesday evening. At least 3 people were taken to hospital and the police have opened a criminal investigation. Here's more on the story.
On Wednesday, a coach fire in a small town in western Switzerland claimed at least 6 lives, prompting the police to open a criminal investigation. Fribourg police reported that the coach was engulfed in flames on a road in the town of Kerzers.
Regarding the incident, it occurred around 6:25 p.m, a little before 6:30 p.m, when calls alerted us to a bus on fire on Annukrittenstrasse. At that location, emergency services, police, paramedics and firefighters found a bus engulfed in flames. Injured individuals had exited the bus. The firefighters extinguished the blaze in several stages, and we have now determined that there are deceased individuals inside the bus. We will have to wait for my colleagues in the investigation to determine the number and identity of the deceased.
Frederic Papot said, "At this stage, a deliberate act could be the cause of this tragedy. We really want to find out what happened."
Well, at this point, a deliberate act could be the cause of this tragedy. We really want to know what happened, and for that reason, we are appealing to the press and, through you, to the public and witnesses of this event.
The police also added that 3 injured people were taken to hospital.
Australia has granted 2 more Iranian female football players humanitarian visas after they expressed they wanted to stay in the country. The players, plus a previous 5, were granted asylum after concerns about the team's safety when they did not sing the national anthem ahead of their match against South Korea last week. Australia's Immigration Minister, Tony Burke, happily welcomed their decision to stay.
2 members of the group that was part of the Iranian women's soccer delegation had indicated that they wanted to take up an offer from Australia. One was a player, one was a support person. With the assistance of the Australian Federal Police, they were separated from the rest of the group and taken to a safe location. When I met with them, I made them the same offer that I had made the 5 players the night before, and that was that if they wanted to receive a humanitarian visa for Australia, which would have a pathway to a permanent visa, I had the paperwork ready to execute that immediately. They both said that they did. We as a nation are lucky that you chose us, and I think they are only just beginning to realise just how welcome they are here in Australia.
You're watching Daybreak on A News. I'm just taking a very short break. When we return, I'll come back with some more stories in regards to what's taking place across the morning. Stay with me. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. Now we head over to what's going on in Europe, and nuclear power is back at the centre of Europe's energy debate as leaders gather near Paris for a major summit on the future of nuclear energy. Here's more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the International Atomic Energy Agency hosted a major summit on the future of nuclear power. Leaders from governments, financial institutions, and industry met near Paris to discuss how nuclear energy could help meet rapidly rising electricity demand while cutting carbon emissions. Support for nuclear power is growing again as countries search for reliable low-carbon energy sources to complement renewable power and strengthen energy security. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Europe made a strategic mistake by turning away from nuclear energy over the past decades.
While in 1990, 1/3 of Europe's electricity came from nuclear, today, it's only close to 15%. This reduction in the share of nuclear was a choice. And in hindsight, it was a strategic mistake for Europe to turn its back on a reliable, affordable source of low-emission power. This should change for 2 good reasons. First, because nuclear and renewables have a key role to play, this is not an either-or. It is in combination that they are most powerful. Because what we need is the best overall energy mix: clean, affordable, resilient, European.
She also said the current Middle East crisis is a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities created by dependence on fossil fuels. French President Emmanuel Macron also used the summit to highlight how France's large network of nuclear reactors could give the country a strategic advantage in the race for artificial intelligence. He said the country's abundant low-carbon electricity, including significant exports to neighboring countries, could support the development of energy-intensive AI data centers without putting pressure on domestic power supply. The Paris summit reflects a broader shift in global energy policy as governments increasingly look to combine nuclear power with renewables to build a stable, low-carbon energy system for the future. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
President Donald Trump is warning Iran against laying sea mines in the Strait of Hormuz, as the Pentagon reports new U.S. casualties since the start of the Operation Fury. Here's more from that.
President Trump has warned Iran that any efforts to lay mines in the Strait of Hormuz will be met with serious military consequences. Trump warned Iran that the U.S. will target any small boats used to lay sea mines that would impede the strategic waterway, where over 20% of the world's oil exports pass through. The Pentagon has released new casualty figures in the war. About 140 U.S. military personnel have been wounded in missile and drone attacks by the Iranians since the start of Operation Epic Fury. 7 U.S. soldiers in total have been killed. On Tuesday, President Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, said that the military operation was necessary, given that the Iranians told him during negotiations that they had the right to enrich uranium at high levels, which could easily and quickly be converted to a nuclear weapon. In a briefing to the press, General Dan Kane, the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, said that the U.S. military has struck more than 5,000 targets since the beginning of the conflict, leading to a reported 90% reduction in Iranian missile launches against Israel and Arab Gulf countries. General Kane said that destroying Iran's military-industrial base was a key objective of the U.S., and he believed that the Iranian military was adapting its tactics as the war progresses. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said that he believes that Iranian leaders are getting, quote, desperate and are scrambling. The Secretary of War added that the military operation will go on for as long as required by the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump, in order to achieve identifiable objectives while avoiding open-ended nation building. Ube Shabander, A News, Washington.
Now, to mark the first making of the Lord of the Rings film, Britain's Postal Service is releasing 8 themed stamps of the actual film. It's in collaboration with Warner Brothers and depicts key characters from the movies that are based on books by J.R.R. Tolkien. And to make it even more special, when a UV light is shone over each of the first class stamps, a hidden message in Elvish writing in the shape of a ring appears. That's what Royal Mail said, so it's very interesting. I'd love to get that. Now, the 6-film saga has earned $6 billion at the global box office and has won 11 Academy Awards, making it the most awarded film in a series. The stamps now are, and a range of collectible products can be pre-ordered from today and will then later go on sale on the 20th of March. Just look at that. So interesting. Well, thank you so much for watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. I'll be back tomorrow to take you through the rest of the latest updates throughout the morning, but make sure you stay tuned to A News with further important updates, especially in regards to what's taking place in the Middle East and Iran and the US and Israel. Don't go anywhere. Take care.